I would say the same advice I got actually 20 years ago is more valuable now, and it's do stuff. And do stuff is pretty vague. But what I mean by that is, actors have to wait for a script. And then a lot of my creator, writer, actor friends realize, well, what if I write the script, right? And so you start to become your own storyteller. And it's the same with writers and production. Instead of writing the script and needing someone else to produce it, just like actors need a script to perform, you produce it and start making stuff as soon as you can. Like It's Always Sunny, right? That's exactly what those guys did. And look at them now, they're still making that show all these years later. So I'm not saying everyone's going to be It's Always Sunny, but you get a little name for yourself as, hey, this guy does stuff.
Welcome to the Pioneers of Possibility podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Afzal. If you like the show, please like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And today we begin our art series. And with me today is a great guest, Sam Laybourne, TV writer and showrunner. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much. Kareem and I go way back, so it's a pleasure to be on this show.
So Sam, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into the business.
Absolutely. So I've been a TV writer for, I think, 21, 22 years now. It's been a minute. And I started out as a teacher in New York City, public schools, as a high school teacher. And at that time, my sister was doing some sketch comedy. She was a performer and actress, specifically a comedian. And so we started collaborating a little while I was a teacher, including singing a very kind of raunchy comedy song on Comedy Central. And we would perform it in clubs in New York City, and then I would teach during the day. And I remember it's so funny because I was so concerned that my students and their parents would be in an uproar. But the most I ever got was a kid walked by in the hall and said, "Hey, I saw you on TV last night," and kept walking. And turns out New York City parents don't really care what their teachers do. So it was like a concern that went nowhere. It ticked in the back of my mind, like maybe this is something I want to pursue. So about 4 years into teaching, I decided to start writing a screenplay. And eventually I wanted to move out to LA. So when I did that, my sister was already established as an actor, performer, and a bit of a writer. So I kind of used her recipe, her suggestion to start finding my footing. And that was basically do something, get involved. And I say this to young people breaking the industry today as well. It's even more applicable now with the media landscape changing. But basically the idea was I'm going to come out, start to do some improv, meet a creative community of comedians. I started writing little comedy bits. I was actually hip-pocketed as an actor with a big management company. What I found out is hip-pocketed means we're not going to really sign you, but we'll throw you out on some auditions without any training, because if you hit, we'll make some money. And so I kind of flailed at that for a little while and found my way into a writer's room as an assistant. A friend of mine, a friend of my father's husband was a showrunner, and he had heard about me, and I went in a suit and tie, and he completely mocked me because this is a comedy writer. But he hired me as an assistant, and I, busted my butt as a writer's assistant, which is now a very highly coveted job. Basically, you're in the room with the writers doing everything from proofreading scripts to inputting dialogue that they're saying out loud to formatting outlines to dealing with the distribution of these scripts and so long and so forth. So it's a big job that's essentially a support staff. And I was not great at it, but I was, I think, spirited in the room, and people got the sense that I loved comedy and that I was a nice, funny guy. And so I worked as hard as I could at that for about 3 years, working as an assistant on several different shows. And, when you're breaking into the comedy world, or the writing world, there's a lot of heartbreak. So one show that I worked on, the promise was that if we got an additional episode order after the original 13, that they would promote me to a staff writer. And that's the brass ring. When you're back when I was coming up, if you got that staff writer job and you worked hard and you were a good person and you had some talent, you could kind of string together a series of jobs. But getting that first one was really hard.
Let's step back a little bit
Yes,
so
please.
I can understand. So
Yeah.
a staff writer gets to create series, or they take an idea from
That's a great question.
some overlord
Yeah.
who says, write something about this.
Yeah,
Right? This
yeah.
is the outline.
That's a great question. So the way writers' rooms work for comedies, and it's similar in dramas, and it's changing over time, but essentially a classic comedy writers' room has a series of writers that have different titles based on their basically pay scale and experience level. Staff writer is the entry level. Then you have story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer, and EP. All of those titles are just different pay scales along the way.
Okay.
But essentially, it's a group of peers in a room who are paid at different scales and have different experience levels, who are all there to service the show. And the person who hires them is called the showrunner. And that is the job I had on Acapulco on Apple TV Plus. I was
Great
the
show.
showrunner. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I was hired on that show after the first 2 seasons, and I came in. But what was cool is because it was a streaming show and they have small episode orders, many of the writers from the previous 2 seasons moved on to other shows. Apple had a long pickup window between seasons. So writers are freelance, so they have to go and do their thing. The nice thing was I was able to hire a lot of new writers into that Acapulco experience. And for me, on that show, it's really important to hire specific Latino voices, some Mexican Americans, some people from Mexico, so that we could nail the bilingual nature of that show. But basically what you create as a showrunner is you hire a group of everywhere from maybe 4 to 10 writers, depending on the budget of your show. And then that group together writes the show. So as a showrunner, I might come in and say, okay, here's the premise of the show. I've written a pilot. The pilot is that first episode that gets commissioned by a studio, and a streaming platform or a network. You go through the development process, which basically is about a year of figuring out how just the first episode works. Then because
getting the pilot right is critical to getting the order for the series.
Completely.
Yeah.
And it's also important for the health of the series, because you want to establish tone and you want it to test well. And these are 2 varying things. Testing is, how does the audience respond to this? And so, yeah.
And so for testing, is it a limited amount of people who see it, or do they test with a broader audience?
They'll test, work? It's limited, and it's enraging. And here's why. It's a necessary evil, but they'll test in a few different markets. But they're going to Vegas, for instance, and they're soliciting they want to get the most everyday Joe kind of people. So Vegas is a good place because it draws people from all over the country. But they're asking people to spend 3 hours of their time for, $75 to come into a room and test group this thing. And it's a fun thing to do, but you also...
So they watch in a room. So it's a controlled environment. They watch in a room. Are they given emotional counters to say how they liked
exactly
character or plot?
That's exactly it. They're given.
I have no idea about
that. No, you're right onto it. They have dials, and I've actually never watched. I've read a lot of the reports from testing, but they have dials for every second of the show. So what's so interesting though about testing is they're looking at our emotional response to a show. So at times, if you have a show that has a jerk character, people will tune, and there's basically turn the dial down if you don't like it, turn it up if you like it. But if a character like Seinfeld, George Costanza, comes into a scene, he's the most hilarious character ever, but he's kind of a jerk, right?
I'm the opposite.
So some testing will show that we don't like George Costanza character. That doesn't mean that he's not essential to the show and one of the best parts. But the testing is hard to kind of like decide, is the person saying, I don't like the way they're constructed, or I actually have an emotional response that's negative to the person? because a lot of times what you see with network TV, if shows are over tested, is that they'll hone all the rough edges of a show, and you get something that's sort of pleasant but not really intense or edgy, because you're responding to testing so much that you've overcorrected, and now the show feels kind of bland, and everyone's likable, but nothing's that funny. So
testing can be a creator's nightmare.
It's really
it's a blessing and a curse,
completely.
And polishing the edges so you don't make it too round, so that the show doesn't have enough edge or enough characters from that are rounded enough.
That's
you don't want them too rounded. You don't want them too sharp, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And testing,
unless you're Succession.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you
where
just
everybody has sharp elbows.
Right. Yeah, and Succession is a great idea because it's subscriber based, right? So when HBO makes that show, they're really looking at the creator and they're saying, we're going to back their voice, and a little less testing, a little more specificity and edge. They don't need as big of an audience for Succession to be a hit because it's on a streaming platform as a network show needs, where a streaming platform might have a show that has 300 to 400,000 devoted viewers, and that's enough because those are bringing new subscribers to that platform. A network show is looking for 2 to 4 million people to watch it. So there is some truth that you have to follow testing, but it's an inexact science, and it can be really hard. It actually reminds me, like in the political space, right? It's the same thing with testing out. It happens all the time with sort of like polling constituents.
Sure.
And the danger is a politician can get so safe that they end up like, what do you stand for? Who are you? Like, when Hillary Clinton ran, there was this idea that like maybe she should have shown her a more emotional side. And there was that small meeting she did in Vermont or something where she cried a little and got emotional. And all the testing said, Hillary Clinton, do not cry. Don't show that you're showing this like softer side. But it was her most winning moment because she was three-dimensional. So that's a total tangent. But anyways, you get the idea that like as an artist, you have to stride the line between market and what you want to say. And so anyways, you make this pilot, you do it the best you can. And then you finally get it to a place where you're proud of it. And then the network decides if they're going to pick it up. And if they do, that's when you staff up and you create the whole series with a bunch of writers. And that's sort of the longest possible answer to your question.
So when a show gets picked up, what time frame are we thinking? Is it months?
Pre-production.
How many months?
Yeah, it's about pre-production ends up being about 8 to 12 weeks.
8 to 12 weeks. This is a very intense process.
The minute you get picked up, you're on the phone with the writers you want to hire, and you're trying to get into a room as quickly as you can, because pre-production is just the writers working on the ideas while the sets are being built. A line producer, the person who handles the physical production of the show. Casting is happening. Although you've already cast the pilot, which is helpful. You're basically crewing up and getting all these things going. And so you have about 8 weeks to start getting the scripts in a pipeline. Then with network TV, you go into production while you're still writing.
Okay.
And in streaming, which I far prefer,
not a lot of time for iteration, right?
Yes.
So you got to get it.
It's going
close to perfect as quick as you can.
That's right. And what's nice about that is you can't triple think stuff.
Right.
You got to kind of go with your gut. And we call it the script eating machine, which is production.
And it's
wood
chipper.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wood chipper of ideas. So you got to keep going, and you can't get too precious. But then, and then in the streaming side, because you have a little more time, that can be an advantage and a disadvantage. You can take too much time and you lose the sort of essence of a project. But at the same rate, when I'm in production on a network show, I can't necessarily be in the room writing and down on set watching it be filmed. So I need to ask other people in my team to go down there and cover set. And that can be wonderful. But depending on the kind of show, it's as a showrunner, you also want to be on set and showing your team that you value that piece of the process.
Well, I'll get to that in a second. But so you have a team of writers.
Yeah.
You have the lead writer.
Yeah.
How do you give constructive feedback to say, no, that's garbage, right? So this is my vision.
Yeah.
And how do you keep consistency of story arc when there's so many hands
Yeah.
in the pot? So I can imagine that could be complicated.
It's very complicated. And I would say my favorite part of the process now, I'm getting older. I'm ancient in terms of writer's room.
You're still young.
As like over 50. But, I think I've learned over time that best kind of show running, or at least the one works for me, is that I hire really talented people, be very decisive in showing them my target. And what I mean by that is, here's what I love. I'm not so into that. But doing it in a really kind way, and also being loose, like being open to being surprised. I've worked with some showrunners who have this idea, and someone gave me a great example. This very prominent writer and creator, Jason Katims, who did Friday Night Lights and Parenthood and a bunch of other shows. He's excited to see stuff in the cut, in the final cut, that he didn't know was going to occur. Meaning, on set, one of his writers, who's not him, was there with the director, and the actor said, "Let's try this." And they tried it, and it was cool. And so he's excited when he's surprised by choices that weren't his. It can be really dangerous if you're a showrunner who needs to touch everything in your show, and you sort of get quickly into this feeling of like it's almost adversarial. Like, I know exactly what the code is to make this thing work. No one else can really do it. And what happens is you get showrunners who are very controlling. They start to resent their staff. You're not getting it, guys. That negative morale creates this fissure. So the biggest thing you can do is not know what the show is to go in and say, I have some gut level instincts about what I really don't like and what I love, and I'm going to really let you know when I love it. And that's going to train people in a positive way to like, that's my target. And over time, it's incredible. Like, if the writers out here are fantastic. So if you trust them and you empower them over the course of the first month or two, they really hone in on what you dig. And then it's really your job to curate. Often writers, like showrunner, will kind of go through a script at the last minute with a few of the writers and punch it up and just sort of make sure it's in line with the tone of the show. But I found the more like so many things in life, like the older you get, the more you don't know.
Sure.
The more you relax. The first time I was a showrunner, I was so freaked out and tight. Everything was a referendum.
Which show was that?
That was the Michael J. Fox show.
Michael J. Fox show, okay.
And a noble...
I mean, you had a generational talent that you were working with on the show.
Yeah. It was incredible. It was my first show. I owe it to Will Gluck, who also...
That was your actual first show?
Yeah, that was the first show that I was running.
That you were running, okay.
And I co-created it with my mentor, Will Gluck, who's really my fairy godfather in a lot of ways. He's the one who gave me my first writer's assistant job.
Okay.
And we got along really well. And so we ended up collaborating. He put me in position to pitch Michael J. Fox this take. And we took it around town. And because
and you had Michael J. Fox's blessing.
Yes.
To shop this around.
We had, and he was in the pitch with us. And this is one of my heroes. He was incredibly generous and collaborative. And we went in and sold it to every network. And the network that bought it for a full season order off of the pitch, which is unusual. It hadn't happened in 15 years in network TV. So what that means is, like, I'm going to tell you for 15, 20 minutes what the idea is. And the network said, great, we're buying an entire season of 22 episodes.
Which is extremely rare today. And it was rare then, too.
Yeah,
you said 15 years.
Yeah, it was. And I don't know if it's happened. Maybe it's happened since. But and I think in hindsight, as I reflect, it was so much pressure. My mentor, I wanted to kill it for him, of course. Like he had basically handed me this Cadillac. But at its core, we were doing something really revolutionary. We were centering Michael J. Fox, who was, in his unbelievably heroic and brave fight with Parkinson's. We were centering a man with Parkinson's in this show. And I think we probably did not go far enough to actually just make the show about what is this journey he's on. Instead, we made a network family show, which was also a cool idea because we were sort of normalizing this disability without constantly commenting on it. But I think for the audience, they struggled to with empathy. We all love Michael J. Fox. When you see him in a comedic scene, but you can tell he's obviously he's fine with it. He has a sense of humor about his illness. But for other people, it's hard to stay in a comedic space when you're seeing somebody. You have an empathetic gene that just jumps out and says, "Oh no, he's not well."
Yeah.
And suddenly the comedy, for some audience,
it doesn't land.
Yeah. And for me,
the way intended.
Exactly. And for me, I'd worked with him so much that, you know, he's struggling to walk down the hallway and he's pissed off, and it's hilarious to me. But that's because I know this guy and I know his sense of humor. And but you know, long story short, it was a big gig, and I learned so much.
How many seasons?
We did one full season.
One full, okay.
But they didn't air the last 7, which was a heartbreak for me because, of course, I thought they were our best work. You know, it takes a long time to figure out a comedy. And really the second half of most first-year comedies, if they're strong, they like start to figure it out. And so
they start to say, we're going to renew you for the next season.
Yes, exactly.
Before the season's done.
That's right. And we struggled with our ratings, so it got canceled. And that's fine. It was still a blessing because I got to learn on the job and I got to work with my hero. And you know, he's just a tremendous guy. And so I will never regret that. So after Michael J. Fox, we had this great year. I learned a lot. I came, we were living in Brooklyn. We came back to LA because
if I may step back, did you shoot the Michael J. Fox show out here in California or in New York?
In New York, okay. Which was, so it was a huge period in our lives because God bless my wife, Heron, who you know, she and the kids were very young. We all moved the whole circus to New York for 2 years. And the first year was Michael J. And we lived in Dumbo, and then we lived in Clinton Hill in Brooklyn. But we shot at the Silver Cup, which is a very famous studio where 30 Rock was done. And so we had a lot of the same crew as 30 Rock, which was a huge show for me. And in the same offices that The Sopranos was done.
Gabagool, over here.
And so I was just like, this is cool. You know, after that, I got an overall deal at ABC Studios here which for writers, showrunners is sort of this moment that happens less and less now, but it's an opportunity to work at a studio where they pay you a certain overhead. You have offices, you have an assistant, you're able to do a certain level of development that's hard when you're just a freelancer. And then you're also assignable to their shows on their network or on their studio runs. So during that time period, I was sort of the number 2 at a show called Grandfathered with John Stamos, and became really good friends with John Stamos, which is a trip. And then I worked on Blackish. I worked on a show called Real O'Neills. These are all ABC shows.
ABC shows.
Yeah. Or Grandfather was actually ABC Studios for Fox, but Blackish and Real O'Neills were ABC shows. So I was sort of an in-house guy of a co-EP who would work on these shows in an advisory capacity and then also try to sell my own pilots. And so I've written, many
and
pilots.
You had that space, right? So you would work on these kind of institutional shows, but you would also try to create your own content.
That's right.
And then pitch it. And you were with ABC. So at that time, if you were working on something, they owned the rights to your pilot?
That's right. And it was ABC Studios. So ABC Studios, things have changed in a way, like things have gotten more vertically integrated, which means they're the stacking rights that deal with streamers, studios, and the platforms they have. So now it's sort of like if you are doing a show with CBS Studios, the chances are that it's probably going to live at CBS because they're in a relationship together. And
I didn't know that. Okay.
ABC Studios is in a relationship with ABC. It used to be that each studio, there's studios like Warner Brothers and Sony that don't have a network affiliation. And
Warner Brothers is
we'll see.
We'll see what happens. Yeah,
we'll see. But in a bad way, unfortunately, for creative types, it's a much better landscape when there's lots of players who are not affiliated. These entrenchment, or once these enmeshments, that's not a word, entanglements.
There we go.
Come about, you suddenly have less buyers. So the market is changing. It used to be, and this is cis white male privileged point of view, but it used to be if you were a hardworking TV writer who had a couple good credits. My first credit was Arrested Development, which was awesome. And it was
show.
Like such a learning experience for me. And I thank, the Lord every day that I had that opportunity, because it brings you into a room and it opens doors. People say, well, if this guy was on that, he must be solid. But it used to be that if you were that person and you had some credits, when you went out to sell a show, so that's called development, you would kind of comfortably feel like, I'm going to make this really good, this like 20-minute pitch. I'm going to team up with a couple producers and we're going to sell it. And it was pretty much, you didn't know who, but you felt like
somebody would pick it up.
Yeah. And then you'd often get some of the projects I've sold have had competing buyers. It raises the value.
And is that a bidding war between studios?
Yeah. Okay. And that hasn't happened to me a ton, but when it happens, you'll have, two studios saying, come with us, we're going to give this on the air, and they'll give you some guarantees, like a put pilot, which means they have to pay the studio a penalty if they don't produce your pilot.
They cancel.
Yeah. And that
after the pilot.
And that can be, the writer never sees that money, but it's basically the way the studio gets the network to put their skin in it. Now that's less. It's just harder to sell because there are less buyers, and there's been this shrinking in the streaming space where less buyers are making stuff.
I'll get to streaming in a little bit, but I want to talk a little more about the creative process.
Yeah,
so as a showrunner and a writer, how involved are you in, of course the director is directing.
Yeah.
But how involved are you in watching the actors and watching how the product is getting turned into the product?
Yeah, the product. It's a great question. It's actually, in TV, one of the things that I love about TV, maybe it's an egomaniac thing, but writers, it's really a writer's medium. In features, the joke sort of is that writers sell this script to a director, and the director
in feature-length films, right?
In feature-length films. Okay. Theatrical release or even on streaming platforms. But the director, who's a much bigger name, says, thanks a lot for your script. Get the hell out of here. They don't really want a writer on set because it's really a director's medium. Directors will often rewrite the script. They'll tailor it to their cast. And that's just sort of how it began and how it's always been. And that's wonderful, not to begrudge writers who mainly work in features. But I got some great advice from executives early on. Michael Fuchs at HBO was one. Dan Adler was an agent at CAA. Just sort of about where should I look into this business? And this was before really the golden age of TV and streamers were around. But I got a lot of advice of like, really, you'd sort of like think of writing for features as like the best thing, and TV was more like, eh. And I got a lot of advice that like TV is where it's at. And I went right into TV, and I'm so thankful for that advice because writers control the medium. So the showrunner in TV is the head writer, and you hire directors. So on a great pilot, you will hire a really accomplished director. When I did my pilot Hug Machine at CBS 3 years ago, we had Jorma Taccone, who's one of the guys in the Lonely Island. I don't know if you know the SNL group like that does I'm on a boat, like those songs, or like they're like, they write these really funny songs, and it's Andy Samberg, and they're a collective of amazing producers. So I teamed up with Jorma to direct the pilot, but in series, Jorma will be an executive producer, but the writer actually goes on to run the show. And you hire, because of the way TV works, you need to rotate through directors, meaning you have visiting directors who are incredible and accomplished, but their job is really to come in, talk to the showrunner, see what their vision is, and collaborate.
And execute on that.
And then they go on to another show. So what's cool...
And you see that a lot now in streaming, right? So when, some Acapulco episodes were directed by different people, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You see that in, I can't think of the particular Apple TV series, but, 3 different
Pluribus
shows are directed by different people.
Yes, yeah. Like Ted Lasso is a famous one where, I know some of the directors who cycled through that show, And, by the end of a run of a show, you might have had, 20 directors.
How's that for consistency
Yeah.
and balance that,
Yeah.
you're not giving, and those shows got it right? So
Yeah.
those directors,
Yeah.
you felt like you were watching a consistent theme and a message and
Yeah.
a story arc that didn't make the viewer dizzy.
That's right. And I think that's really the writing staff that does that, and the actors. They're both sort of stewards for this tone that the visiting. It's a hard job to be a visiting director because you want to have a light hand and you want to really defer to the showrunner a lot. And so, to answer your question, like as a showrunner, either you or you have writers who really understand what you're looking for on set, covering set with the director.
So you're like a shadow director,
sort of. But
I don't want to call it that. But,
Yeah.
Well, it's layperson terminology.
But I think that's a fair term, is to say you're sort of like you're
quality control.
Yeah, and the best showrunners, when you're in that position, don't try to micromanage the director. Again, it's like, I want a director to bring something to the table. It might be 10 degrees off of what the tone normally is, but suddenly we're doing a shot we've never done, and it's like, we're going to keep doing that.
Right.
So you want it to be additive, but then there are moments like, where they'll turn the camera, and you'll say, we don't really do that. Like, we're not turning the camera, or they'll be really handheld as opposed to on a dolly for a specific shot, and you'll say it's the camera's jostling too much, and it'll be sort of off-putting to the viewer,
too disorienting.
Yeah. And we have what we call tone meetings. So I'll sit down, when I'm the showrunner, I'll sit down with the director and we'll talk through the script for a couple of hours before they start directing to really hear what their vision is, and to push back when it feels like that might not be tonally right, or hey, we realize with this actor, when they do long speeches, it gets in their head. So why don't you break up this speech and have them say part of it here and cross the room and say part of it here to give it some dynamism? We may sort of share the tricks of the trade with them, but I think, it can be dangerous, because if you're a showrunner that's a real bully, you can not allow the director to do their best work. And then they feel like, man, I'm just following whatever they want, and they get tight. Like anyone, like if you have a boss who's too micromanaging. And the same with actors. You have to trust that they have a cool take on something. And when it goes really off the rails and you're like, whoa, that was a huge performance and it's too strange, you just gently say, hey, let's try one that's a little softer, and you sort of ride that.
I want to step back to your stand-up time.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Please.
So tell me, what about your stand-up time? So you got to try jokes, songs, try things with the audience. You were performing in front of people. What was that like?
Yeah.
And what did you take from that experience, and how did that translate to to what you are today?
Well, it's a great question.
And you did that while you were teaching?
I did that.
Or there was a bit of crossover?
There was a bit of crossover. So I was performing with my sister while I was still teaching.
Yeah.
And it gave me a lot of the kind of stand-up I did was more like we would sing comedy songs. And then in my own work, like solo stuff, that was with my sister, I would also sing songs or do these like strange character bits. I didn't do, like Kevin Hart straight, one guy with a microphone.
Okay.
I have so much respect for stand-ups who truly, just Eddie Izzard, get with the microphone and just speak. But I always had character bits and stuff. It was a little more alternative comedy. But I learned a few things. One is I learned that nervousness never goes away, and it just changes in how it manifests. And it's when you're not nervous anymore, you have to be nervous.
You should be nervous.
Because suddenly you're not on the edge, and I think honestly, stand-ups who've done it for like 20 years, they have an adrenal excess that they can't stop doing it, because that thrill of being like, I could totally suck, keeps them going. For me, it was almost too much. Like my nervousness, I joked that I had every symptom of nervousness. And before shows, my sister,
would you sweat, shake?
Sweat, bad breath. I would sometimes be nauseous and even throw up.
Oh, man.
I would, forgive me, podcast audience, I would have to pee a lot. And I would get exhausted. like as if I was about to fall asleep. My sister, my poor sister, who was a professional, had to basically coach, because I was semi-professional. She had to coach me through these symptoms every show, and then we'd get out there, and I just go, ah, and she'd be like, this dude had me sweating backstage, and now he's fine.
And you killed it. Yeah.
But it was something about my process. But I think I learned that might not be good for me long term. Like I may actually poison myself with this amount of nervousness. And then quickly, as I came out here, I started auditioning. I got hip pocketed by a management company. And in those auditions, I was not an actor. I didn't have the life of an actor, the preparedness. I would go into readings, and sometimes there's a reader. So like the reader would be behind the camera, and you're supposed to sort of direct towards the camera, and you sort of, into the soft distance, you sort of imagine your characters here. Why? So that the people watching the camera, the producers, see your full face. And
they see your emotion, they see your intention.
Yeah.
They are able to translate how that's going to be in a set.
That's right. And sometimes there's...
And whether you could do it or not.
Right. And sometimes there's a reader in the room. And so you direct stuff sort of to them. But I was doing a scene where there's two characters in the thing. And what I've come to realize from watching amazing actors audition all day long is you always sort of do it, no matter who's reading, what character that reader is doing. Let's say there's three characters in a scene. You always just pretend it's there. So my first big audition was for a family sitcom in which there was a little kid in the scene. Mm-hmm. And so I talk to the reader here, and then she goes to the little kid voice, and I go, "Hey, little Jimmy." And suddenly I'm talking, like I'm literally facing away like this, talking to a little kid. And afterwards, it's like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I've completely blown it.
Facing away from the camera,
Facing
right?
away from the camera.
Instead of
like emoting and showing them what I can do, you end this fever dream of an audition. 2 minutes later, you spent 3 days preparing for this moment. This one, I had actually driven back from a family vacation for it. Got in the room, you're all sweaty, you do this moment. I've completely blown it. And then they just say, "Thanks so much," and you're gone. And it felt like people who can capture lightning in a bottle in that short amount of time and deliver are savants. Some of them are truly crazy. Like not all actors, but some actors, like they just think differently. So they're able to harness this thing. I'm way too in my head about that. So I really learned that auditioning was not for me. And it was a skill I probably could have acquired, but I got into a writer's room. I was on the other side of it suddenly, and it just felt so much more comfortable. And I decided, I don't need the ego trip of being on camera, and that I loved writing for other voices and just being behind the scenes. And that sort of process of doing performance. But it also, like, you try out jokes, some bomb. I bombed. I did this bit where do you remember Movie Phone?
Yeah. Movie Phone. Whoa. Welcome to Movie Phone.
Hello and welcome to Movie Phone.
Yeah, welcome. And it would be like, if you want to see Anaconda, press 1. Remember?
Press 1, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it would be hilarious to be a spoken word poet who had Movie Phone voice.
Yeah.
And I went up at a open mic night, and my bit was like, I'm going to read poems in Movie Phone voice. But I wrote the poems, and I wrote these like really earnest poems. No one knows these poems. It might have worked if I did like, Robert Frost poem or Emily Dickinson, something very famous, Langston Hughes. But because I did poems nobody knows, it wasn't funny at all, Kareem. Like, I'm telling you, it was like the absence of humor. And I
dropped like a brick on somebody's foot, right?
Exactly.
So
it was like a brick on somebody's foot. And I had 3. So I start the first one, no laughs. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go through these 3 poems. And I just read them all. And then, and that is humbling.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. So there's a lot of, trial and error.
So you have worked on, you have on your wall here, hats of all the shows you've worked on.
That's right.
So I'm going to ask you the impossible question, right? So one of these 10, 12 shows that you've worked on, which was your favorite one to work on? It's like asking your favorite child, right?
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with answering that. Second part of the question is, which one did you learn the most about yourself?
I'm going to work backwards.
Okay.
I'm not going to name the show I learned the most about myself, but I will explain it.
Sure.
Because it really was a gift to me. It was the first show about halfway through my career. I'd run the Michael J. Fox show. I had felt like the big man on campus. I'd been the lieutenant on a bunch of shows. I sort of felt like I know what I'm doing. And I got invited to be on a show that I really respected. And it had a specific tone and a specific community. I'd been on the air for 3 years. And I came in for its fourth year and sort of was like, you're welcome. Here I am. And it was a community that had worked really hard to do this tone. And they weren't that necessarily excited about me bringing my voice in. Part of it was that the show was speaking to a cultural experience that's different than mine. I don't think I really debated, because I know my heart, I know I'm open-minded in that I like telling various stories from diverse backgrounds. I felt like I'm going to march in here and be additive, and people are going to get that I'm a good guy. But there was some guardedness to me joining, and instead of really like pumping the brakes, listening, slowing down, maybe just making space for other voices, I tried to keep, because when you're a comedian, you're trying to always get shots up and like prove your value. I think I was sort of forcing the issue a little, and I got in my head. And so suddenly I'm like, am I funny? Am I good? And I got resentful. And when you get resentful in a comedy room, you're screwed. Do I wish that there had been more welcomingness to me? Yeah, but if I'm really going to focus on what I could have done differently, I could have felt that and, felt a certain way about it, put it to the side and said, okay, I'm going to maybe make myself slightly smaller for a moment to just really get the vibes of this room and pick my battles and listen. And maybe I still wouldn't have been welcomed, but at least I wouldn't have felt this like sense of frustration. What it taught me is like, yeah, like hearing my wife, who's Ethiopian American, was like, welcome to my experience. And it was like a really profound moment where she was like, when I walk into a lot of spaces, I'm wondering if I'm included because of spoken and unspoken subtleties, right? That's her experience as a Black woman in America. And as a white, cis, man in America, that has never been my narrative. You walk in, you make all these assumptions, people are going to love me. And so it was really humbling. And I really am so thankful to the people in that room for reminding me that lots of people go through this world wondering if they belong, and they get lots of cues that they don't, and they still persevere. And so I certainly can do that on this one show. It helped me read this book. I don't know if you've read, it's my favorite book. I have it right here. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday.
I need to add that to the list.
Yeah, I'm giving it to you. This is yours now. Okay, please take it. It's my favorite book. It's about the moment in your life when you experience failure after experiencing success, and how do the gift you have to humble yourself and start anew. And it was great. It was a great moment in my career to kind of halfway through say, don't take this for granted. You're just as good as your last thing.
For leaders and for people at the pinnacle of their profession.
Yeah.
It is actually very rare that people take those moments of humble pie and that they turn back and introspective and say, what about me?
Yeah.
And
right.
what about my behavior, and what about the actions that I caused in whatever particular situation? What could I have done differently? What was I not listening to? How wasn't I being an active listener? And how will I change that to have better outcomes, whatever it
That's
is,
right.
to have a better situation on the set, or with our team leading climate change, disruption, and these types of things. I think the same can be said in really any situation.
I agree with you, Kareem. It's like if you can get underneath the ego that builds up over a series of successes, it's really important. And it's kind of like you have to check yourself every year, actually. Like, am I getting too high in my own supply? And that's, you see that in the political space too, where you have to project such confidence that suddenly you believe you are the man in a way that can make you impenetrable to the kind of criticism you need. And we won't get into politics, but it's certainly happening in our
in society today. I also think there's a bit of selective vulnerability that is important for people to show of themselves, right?
Yeah.
we're all human, and you
Right.
don't have to be this steely figure that
That's right.
projects, sort of square-jawed Steely Cage.
Yeah.
Whatever the stereotype is, that people appreciate that, then they're more vulnerable, and the work product, whatever it is, in society is just better for people.
So, favorite child question, I would honestly say I've been really lucky, and I've been on a lot of wonderful experiences. I'm currently working on a show called DMV, which I would say it may be recency bias, but I love this show. I'm not the creator or the showrunner. I'm one of a few co-EPs, sort of number two lieutenant types, and it's just a wonderful, loving community. But I'd probably say over the course of my entire run, it was running Acapulco on Apple TV Plus. It was a friend of mine, Austin Winsberg, who I had worked with in the past on a show called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. He hired me when the original showrunner, Chris Harris, who's a friend of mine, went off to run another show called Frasier, the reboot of Frasier. Suddenly they needed a showrunner, and Austin asked me if I would be interested. And it was interesting because the show is bilingual. It features an almost entirely Mexican cast. It's shot in Puerto Vallarta for Acapulco. And I'm a white guy from New York City. And so I led with that when I interviewed. I said, there's a lot I don't know.
Do you know Spanish?
I do know
have
some
to show
Spanish.
us some Spanish.
Yeah.
So,
I do. I have a functioning knowledge of Spanish. The showrunner before me actually knew less Spanish than me. But what we did was I just made it really crystal clear to the people hiring me. I want to hire a cast of writers who can really speak to this tone, come from largely Latino background. And they supported that. And so I was able to hire, most of the people in the room were Spanish speaking or from Mexico or Mexican American, so that we could, make it a more authentic experience. And it was incredible. The crew down in Mexico was like a family. The actors are very young and family-like and not jaded and inclusive. And it was a dream job. I got to go down and run a show. It's my second time running a show. So I got to learn all the things I had kind of gotten wrong or wanted to perfect, try it out in this really supportive community. And the tone of the show is really in line with what I like to do, which is a lot of heart, a lot of heart
in that show.
Yeah. It's I'm an old softie, and so we try to have a lot of big comedy, but it has a visual language that's really fun. And honestly, it changed my life. It brought me a lot of joy. I got to be down in Puerto Vallarta a lot. I got to make great friends who I'm now continuing to work with. And it was a proof of concept of running a show with kindness that succeeded. The first one was sort of this high profile failure, even though everyone had a great time and we learned a lot. It didn't sustain a full season. Whereas this show, I was able to get another season, and a fourth season of a streaming show is very rare. So I felt like not only did the process work and everyone had a good time, and I got to live by my values as a employer, but it was also, the proof was in the pudding. Like, the show quality was strong, and we've been nominated for a bunch of awards, which feels great. And people were recognized for their work.
The show tied off the stories neatly.
Oh, good.
Right, in a warm and tender way, where that is not true with a lot of the other stuff. With streaming, with broadcast TV, there's a lot of noise, right? So there's a lot of dreck out there that's really bad. There are a lot of new streaming services that have their own shows, and they're bad, right? How does the industry, and how do we as an audience, how do we find the good, right? It's I will say we are in the golden age of TV, because TV series, long-form series, are really a lot better than most of what we're seeing come out in feature-length films. Right? There were a couple of good movies last year. But you could, I'm a tough critic, but I can only count a couple. Like one hand.
Right.
That I would go and sit in a big movie theater and watch.
Well, it's interesting. I would say we're actually at a place. I would say 5 years ago, 100% for sure, we were really in the golden age of TV. Now that streamers they pulled back since the writers' strike of a year and a half ago. Streamers there was this real bubble of spending huge amounts of money. Actors who were awesome actors but were kind of not household names were getting massive per episode fees from streamers to be in their shows. And the budgets really went up on shows, especially in the comedy space. What was a $3 million budget was now a $8 million budget. And, like any gold rush, there was amazing things that came out of it. Some of the greatest shows came out of that time period. You had innovative shows like Russian Doll. You had, Stranger Things came about. You just had.
They didn't tie it off as good as I wanted.
Yeah. It was a highly debatable ending. But Game of Thrones, which also people had
ruined the series for me.
Wishes the ending. It was like it really was this incredible time period. Successions and there, just so many shows we can name. But now it's harder to sell shows, so there's been a contraction. And what's interesting is on the feature side, there's actually starting to be movement. And it's so ironic. I've been doing this long enough.
Sure.
When I started the biz, features were where it's at. TV started to creep up. TV rose. And then at some point, all my feature writer friends were like, hey, how do I get into your biz? And now, 20 years later, a lot of my TV writer friends are trying to sell rom-coms and movies again. So it keeps shifting. But I think the reason why, it's twofold. Movies there's new independent funding for movies. So I think you'll start to see movies like Anora. Did you see Anora?
I didn't see Anora.
It's amazing. It's very intense, and it may not be for everyone, like in regards to its display of sex, and but it was quite good. And it was Neon is this company that's independently financing movies that it feels like having a good awards play at Cannes and other places. And that's like a model that's starting to come about. In the TV side, we're actually starting to replicate that with Mark Duplass and some other people who are trying to make independent TV. And there was a show called Tires on Netflix, which was independently funded.
So the independent funded stuff is mainly for streaming services?
Yes.
Or can it get picked up by a regular studio?
I don't think that's happened yet. It's a great question.
Not happened yet.
Tires was a case where a great comedian whose name I'm just blanking on right now made this super budget show, sold it directly to Netflix, and it was kind of groundbreaking. And other people are trying to do the same thing. Right now in my market, comedies have been struggling because they don't sell internationally. So they don't sell as well.
Comedy just lands differently in different cultures, and what people find funny in Japan is totally different than what they find funny here.
Right. Like in some country, there's a phrase that's probably like, you got an egg on your shoulder that kills. And here we're like, what does you got an egg on your shoulder?
And I go to Japan a lot, right? So I watch TV at night, and I'm like, how is this amusing? Right?
Shout out to Japan for all their wacky reality show stuff that has
really wacky
influenced us. But
you turn on at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
What the hell is it?
Yeah. It's somebody like greased up with like a shark chasing them. It's wild. And that's what's cool about comedy is it can be regional with streamers because they're going for these huge global subscriptions.
Audience. Yeah.
The phrase is like comedies don't travel. So as a result, networks in America like Fox, CBS are starting to produce single camera comedies at a lower budget. And we're learning as writers how to do more with less. It will affect the content, but hopefully we can still do a great product. So we're in a real time of...
That's not just the entertainment industry. That's every industry, right?
Totally,
so in sort of the economy of scarcity, we all have to find ways to innovate and put out product with less.
Exactly. And there's some good that comes from that, right? But it is when the dollars and cents are the bottom line, you can have less out the box hits because you take less risks. So like when the gold rush was happening, you had a show, I don't know why I'm fixated on it, but like Russian Doll, that was so unique because Netflix was in the business of attracting the most innovative storytelling. That's how they were going to get subscribers. Now they're in the business of being a global behemoth. And so they're trying to get the biggest audience. And that's just a different goal. And so
they're now a wood chipper of ideas, right? There's all kinds of stuff.
There's all kinds of stuff
that's going up.
Exactly. And the stuff that appeals to a broad audience is sometimes awesome. Like, you have like Stranger Things. We can talk about the ending, but like, a show that's just fun and brings family and kids together. So the last part of your question is like, how do we find the good stuff? I still think it's a lot like movies. It's word of mouth, in the TV landscape. If a few what tell me something's good, I'll give it a shot.
Do you put out an online list of
what I like?
Of what you like?
I don't. It's sad. As a dad and a writer,
you're busy.
I don't get enough time to consume stuff. But now that the kids are older, I've started watching more, and I'm obsessed with this very strange show called The Chair Company.
That is super bizarre. My daughter loves it.
Yeah. Okay.
We watched it. We went to run a 50K together in Texas together, and at night we watched like 4 episodes of this. Yeah. She's crying, laughing.
Yeah.
And I found it
too bizarre.
It's strange, but I couldn't stop watching.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's so strange.
It's so strange. And I got a tip of my cap to Tim Robinson, who's the creator, and he did the show I Think You Can Leave, which I really recommend. It's a sketch show, so the weirdness comes in smaller bite-sized chunks. But I really applaud that show because it's so specific. It's not for everyone, but it's like if you hit it on the right time, and I think with young people who really value absurdism, it's not.
He's pretty absurd.
It's not actually like when I came up and I would see comedy of like that's absurd. My first instinct is I don't like that, and so I'm trying to train my eye to say, well, what's cool about it? And I recently supervised a young writer who does absurdity really well, and it was a lot I had to really check myself and say, hey, I'm supervising him to get his tone. It's not my tone.
Not your tone.
And so I had to really stretch. And then once you get into that vibe and you realize, okay, every character who comes into this world is going to have a very weird take and be very self-obsessed in their own quirky way. I've grown to love it.
Watching you on social media, you were a very active voice during the writer's strike.
Yeah.
Tell me what you learned about yourself through that.
Yeah.
That was very challenging for writers.
Yeah.
I read a lot and listened to a lot of podcasts about, what the core issues were with growth of streaming and how writers were really taking a big cut. So like cut, not cut, but cut.
Yes.
From these shows. So what did you learn about yourself through that process?
It's a good question. I think I learned I have to stick to my principles and that I can step through that. It's uncomfortable, but I had to. So I was in the middle of producing the 3rd season of Acapulco. It's my first showrunning gig in 10 years. And like I said, I loved the process. And we were down in Acapulco and I was mid-production. And we had to, usually when you're in production, you keep retooling until the very end with scripts.
Sure.
But because we knew there was going to be a strike, we had to finish all the scripts and drop our pencils by midnight on this one specific day right before the strike. And we were still praying that there would be a stay of execution and that it wouldn't strike, or that they come to terms that we could agree with as writers. But nonetheless, they made the call to strike. And in the 2007 strike, which I was also in, which dates me, there's this thing that basically producers would continue to do some of their producerial duties after a writer's strike. Like we would not write anymore, but we would edit, we would be on set and produce without changing the words. But there was sort of a gray area. And the writers this time around made it, like the leadership at the Writers Guild made a case to showrunners like myself and a lot of them that to really impact the studio, we had to say we're doing none of our services because, as you well know,
did you walk out?
Yeah. So editing is writing, if you know what I mean.
Of course, yeah.
And being on set,
you're changing words.
Yeah. And being on, and you're putting them in different order, and you're structuring your story. And so we went to this Writers Guild meeting where a couple really prominent writers. One of the the creator of The Shield, made this speech about like, hey, if we're going to do this, we have to fully do this. We need to walk away. And I was compelled. And so I called the studio, my producing partners, and Apple, and I said, hey, I need to walk away completely. And it was, without naming names or anything, it was a hard thing. People were, that was like a hardline approach. No one was totally unreasonable about it. They understood my stance. But when I did that, there are other producers who are non-writers. They finished editing the show. So I had to give up all the creative control of editing. I had to walk away from half of my contract for the year and didn't see a dime. So for me, as a sort of mid-level, not by any stretch millionaire, showrunner, my nut for the year was gone. There were definitely a couple nights early on where I was like, is this the right thing? Could I do the editing and sleep at night? And I realized like, I can't do this. And my wife, thank goodness, was like, honey, do what you got to do. So I walked away and was very depressed because this thing I love was being done without me. And, it was like a lot of it was 8 months. So it was a lot of the first 3 months. I just sort of walked around the strike line in a haze. But it felt good. I could sleep at night. And we didn't get everything we wanted. We were really looking at trying to save our industry because there's this danger that there'll be no room minimums, meaning one person can write an entire show. And this has been proven people can do this. And so suddenly they're not hiring 5 people. They're taking all the money themselves. And while it's impressive, like, oh, wow, you can write a show all by yourself, you've disenfranchised your brothers and sisters who hired you when you were coming. So it's important for me to be able to create jobs for people. So that was one reason we struck. Another one was to fight the stem of AI, which is really important. Like, it would be very easy for me at this point in my career. I'm not saying it would be great, but I could use AI with an idea. Let's say it's like a crime idea.
And you could come up with a pilot.
They could write not just a pilot. We could write a pilot in a week. Then they could write another 10 scripts in another week. And then I could spend a month just by myself punching them up. So they feel pretty good. Like, they're not perfect. They wouldn't be as good as a bespoke thing that a room did, but it would be maybe 75% quality. And are you telling me that a tech-based industry isn't going to go for that streamlined quality? So we're fighting for those things, sure. that AI couldn't just march into our work. And I feel good about it, but it taught me that I can stand by my principles, but also I need company. Like, I was alone. I missed my friends. I missed creating,
How long do you think the industry will be protected from AI? It's a hard question. When we think about even the music industry, one of the top 10 country singers she's an AI. It is an AI voice with a human.
No.
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding you. So
Kareem,
with a human agent, it is 100% generated by.
I had a director friend of mine who I've been mentoring who's younger, in a sort of totally sarcastic thing. This is like right when AI started being talked about. I said, you should direct an AI written script to the best of your ability and then only reveal after the fact. Now that is happening. But I thought it would be like a cool performance art thing. And now I'm glad I didn't tell him to do that. He would be reviled. But yeah, I think it's only a matter of time. Unfortunately, in our industry, I think there's always going to be a need for a human touch. AI is not at the place where it is still an aggregate of everything else that's out there.
Right.
So it has that uncanny valley thing of feeling like, have I seen this before? And you'll hear these cliches. Writers just know when they're doing a cliche or when they've said something that's corny. And sometimes they lean into it and it's like, they're doing something poppy and they want to be corny, but they're still guiding those marionette strings. I think it'll be a while before we see fully AI created content that people are consuming by the masses. But I would not be surprised if in 5 years, There are AI shows created by AI that have one person at the helm, that are ubiquitous. And I think eventually, I don't know what's going to happen. But in all lines of work, like my friends who
in
are
engineering, right? So,
right.
how far will AI go before you don't need designers to create detailed drawings?
Coders. Think about all the
coders,
people
right?
who boned up on coding.
The coders are. There was a huge, long podcast that Google and all of the tech companies got hundreds of thousands of kids to go into tech. And unless you're coming from Stanford, you're living in your parents' basement right now, because the tech companies only want that. Right. So a kid who went to University of Michigan or Michigan State or some other really good school, they're having 100 interviews and they're not getting any bites. And the sort of job market is a very tough thing today, regardless of your industry, for a lot of reasons.
It makes you think about basic income. It makes you think, have we gotten to an advanced place where there just literally aren't enough human jobs that only humans can do? It's why my friends, as I was telling you, like my friend is doing, I told you off camera earlier, my friend has been in the innovation technology space forever, and just bought a music instrument rental company. I think part of it is because it's AI proof, right? People are going to keep playing instruments at least for a while so that you can see them on a physical stage, or people who are going into trades like pipe fitting and HVAC and electrical engineering, things that the world still needs, are going to be. We used to look down on sort of, I don't know, not everyone did, but on sort of trades. There was at least if you were in these sort of like upper echelon Ivy League sort of private school system, you'd be like, well, I'm going to have a white collar job. Those jobs a lot of them are going away unless you're the boss. I think people our age, knock on wood, because we have a lot of experience and we're part of this transition, are very valuable. But I really feel bad for people who are in their 30s or late 20s they need to have the experience years, and there's just not a lot of jobs for them.
It's going to take a lot of people to build the AI data centers, right? So it's going to take plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians. And those data centers are only going to be good for 5 years. Because the way the chips and sort of Moore's law works with the doubling of transistor capacity year on year. And that's functionally what could happen. We have to figure out how to pay for it. But that's a different podcast.
But that's a good point. That's an optimistic point too. Like we got to find a way to like embrace what's happening.
Most parents still don't want their kids to go to trades, right? But the trades can be an exceptional income. They can be exceptional profession for people to build society as we know it.
It's true
into the future, and that's something that society is hung up on, and I think will have to change over time. What advice would you give to a young kid who says, I want to write comedy for TV, streaming? What would be the single thing that you would tell them to focus on?
It's a great question. I would say the same advice I got actually 20 years ago is more valuable now, and it's do stuff. And do stuff is pretty vague. But what I mean by that is, actors have to wait for a script. And then a lot of my creator, writer, actor friends realize, well, what if I write the script, right? And so you start to become your own storyteller. And it's the same with writers and production. Instead of writing the script and needing someone else to produce it, just like actors need a script to perform, you produce it and start making stuff as soon as you can. Because I did some of that when I was coming up. I wish I had done more. I created a show with a friend of mine, actually the upper level writer who was the guy who got me my first job on Arrested Development. We ended up creating a web series together, early web series that I got to act in, write. It was improvised, but structure, edit with him, at times shoot, and then we learned so much about how to make this thing, and we ended up selling it to Stars, which at the time was doing comedy, and we made a little show, and it didn't go the distance. And like It's Always Sunny, right? That's exactly what those guys did, and look at them now. They're still making that show all these years later.
How many seasons is that?
20.
Is it 20?
Yeah.
Jesus.
And they I know those guys. We were coming up at the same time, and I remember when they did that, and I thought, that's cool. And look at them now. So I'm not saying everyone's going to be It's Always Sunny, but when you look at people who have done well, like some of the Lonely Island guys who I was saying I worked with recently, or some of the young SNL writers, there's sort of like a team of auteurs that make stuff at a bargain basement. It's cool enough and specific enough that, they share it on social media, you share it on TikTok, you get a little name for yourself as, hey, this guy does stuff. And then if you're doing that in concert with networking, trying to get on a blue chip kind of TV show job, like a writer's assistant or a PA, if you do that sort of dual focus of, I make stuff and I'm trying conventional modes of getting into the industry, all while doing the third piece, which is writing. That's the best way. It's a hard time, but the people who grind and believe in themselves will find a way. And you have to, if you have a passion, you got to go for it. And you can't give up. Some of my writer friends say they're giving advice to not do this.
Okay.
And that's not it. That's people, this industry is going to keep going. It's just going to change. And so I want people to feel positive about it and go for it. Yeah.
That's great. Well, Sam Laybourne, can't wait to see what you're creating next.
Thank you
very much for being on the show.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
This episode of The Pioneers of Possibility has been produced and edited by Danny Vagnoni, with music credits going to the artist known as Sahari, and artwork for our podcast is presented by the artist known as Layla. I'm your host, Kareem Afzal. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode and you would like to hear more from future episodes, please follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and click the subscribe button on YouTube. And please leave a comment so we can engage our listeners. Thank you very much. See you next time.